Rigby's Roads, Chapter 17, Sturgis, City of Bikes. At dinner, Jack, Red, Henry, and a few of the employees from Wheels dealership sat together at the same table as Wheels. As they went around the table ordering their drinks from the waitress, it became the first big laugh of the night, as the cadence went, Budweiser, Coors, same for me, same, Bud. And then Henry ordered, Mr. Pibb, and everybody laughed hysterically. Then Wheels chimed in,
bring us 2 pitchers of Bud, 2 pitchers of Coors, and hold the Mr. Pibb.
The laughter went on as Wheels and Red prodded Henry into retelling his stories for the rest of the group. Jack never saw so many men laugh so hard in his life. After dinner, Wheels pulled Jack aside and told him,
We'll be setting up our display in downtown Sturgis tomorrow morning. Pinky should show up in a day or 2. The DTs will find our display and we'll make the plans from there. So tomorrow, you 2 go see the town, have a great time, and enjoy Sturgis for all it's worth.
After dinner, the whole gang continued with their arrival party, while Jack and Henry stumbled back across the street to the hotel for an early sleep. The next morning, Jack woke up to the sound of Henry snoring. Henry only had 2 beers, but it was enough to put him in another world. Jack had lost count of his beers, 3, maybe 4. He knew it would help him relax, but when he looked at the clock, it was 10:15 in the morning, and they had slept for 13 hours. Jack turned on the TV and slowly turned up the volume, waiting for Henry to wake up, but he continued to snore. He turned the light on near the bed. Then he finally opened the drapes to let the daylight in, and that startled Henry, who raised his head and asked groggily,
What? What's the matter?
Jack announced, What do you want for lunch?
Lunch?
Henry was still squinting his eyes from the daylight. Jack revealed, It's almost 10:30. We slept 13 hours.
That long?
Yeah, let's go see what the big fuss is about. Let's go see Sturgis. It was 65 degrees, but the temperature was climbing fast and was going to hit 90 before the day was over. They decided to wear their t-shirts and brave the short, cool ride, and that way they wouldn't be burdened with carrying their jackets all day. Henry made Jack put on sunscreen. It was something Jack forgot about, and he was glad Henry brought some. They put on their boots, jeans, and Harley shirts and went outside to the bike. There was a ragged towel draped over the handlebars, and he noticed all of the bikes in the parking lot were also adorned with towels. It was the hotel's way of telling the bikers to use these towels to wipe down the bikes and don't use the towels in the room. Jack was impressed with the idea. On I-90, the motorcycles outnumbered the cars 25-1. They rode past campgrounds filled with campers and bikes. Some bikers came to Sturgis in a car or truck and pulled their bike on a trailer, but that was defeating the whole purpose. Although the ride was long and hard, he now appreciated the great satisfaction that he had completed his ride here. He knew this was a trip that would stay with him the rest of his life. He chuckled. The rest of my life. Wow, I almost didn't have a rest of my life. As they approached exit 32 for Sturgis, there was a large highway sign on the side of the road with blinking lights that said, Through traffic, left lane, which was for the cars. Up ahead, almost every motorcycle was getting off the same exit. The line of traffic stopped almost a half a mile before the exit. Now the ratio of bikes to cars had changed to 1,000-1. Motorcycles, and more motorcycles. Black leather jackets, leather vests, leather pants, tattoos, chains, chrome, beards, patches, bike bags, and skull caps. It was a sea of bikers with one purpose, to be seen. Henry was whirling his arms around and pointing so much that he looked like he was trying to fly. Jack was stunned by the size of the parade he was now walking his bike through. The traffic moved uneasily slow as the bikers took their feet off the foot pegs and had to put them on the ground, slowly walking their bikes off the exit ramp. The connecting streets were like a carnival, with every square inch of real estate taken up with a tent or booth selling anything you can imagine relating to a motorcycle, and they were still more than a mile from downtown. When they turned onto Main Street, the view was overwhelming, as thousands of motorcycles were parked along both sides of the street along the curb, as well as in 2 rows down the center of the street. Jack rode through the sea of bikes, looking for a space to park. Finally, towards the middle of the block, he paused while 2 bikes pulled out and left him a choice spot in the middle of the street in the center of town. The roar of the motorcycles was loud, constant, and reverberating. During the Sturgis rally, every store in town is rented out to motorcycle entrepreneurs. The ocean of bikers moved elbow to elbow down the sidewalks, scurrying in and out of each store. There were food booths set up along the sidewalk areas where alleys once prevailed. The event was a people watcher's dream. Women who look like men who look like hardcore gangbangers, and people with so many tattoos that they looked like they were wearing shirts. Some women had spiked hair, leather bikinis, and pierced body parts that gleamed in the sunlight. Henry finally stopped pointing around because there was too much to point at. They visited each store and stopped to see what was in every booth. As they stared through the window of a tattoo parlor, they looked at the customers getting additional art added to their already tagged bodies. Henry and Jack looked at each other, paused, their eyebrows raised in a yearning for excitement. Then, as quickly as the idea had come up, they both shook their heads and laughed. Nah. Every venue had a motorcycle theme to it, from jewelry to boots to knives and clothes. There were motorcycle parts, new and used, with the used parts sometimes costing more than the new ones. Some parts were from bikes that were more than 50 years old and were a treasure to those who needed them. There were many leather shops with jackets, pants, chaps, headbands, and even underwear. It was truly a leather fetish's dream. Every other booth was selling t-shirts or patches and pins. A patch was the one thing that Jack had to buy, showing a memento of his rebirth and proof of conquering another item on his list of 50. The t-shirts had different pictures of American flags, eagles, motorcycles, Mount Rushmore, or a combination of all. They all had similar taglines of Sturgis 62nd Rally, Black Hills Motor Classic 2002, or simply Sturgis 2002. As he looked through the shirts, 2 things popped out at Jack. It was hard to believe that this rally had been going on for 62 years. The second thing was the t-shirt sizes. He knew about extra large and extra large, but he never could imagine 8 times large. Jack bought a black t-shirt with an eagle and the simple words, Sturgis 2002. Henry went for the Mount Rushmore design. The next had to have was a patch. They walked into a booth that had the most patches and stickers they had seen all day. They could not stop laughing as they took turns pointing to the funny sayings. If I wanted a bitch, I'd buy a dog. If at first you don't succeed, buy her another beer. If you don't limp, you ain't shit. If it flies, fucks, or floats, it's cheaper to rent it. Satan sucks. Bikers stay on longer, and others that needed explaining. Henry politely asked the skinny tattoo salesgirl with the pierced tongue,
Excuse me, ma'am, what do these patches mean? DILLIGAF, FTW, and WJG. What is those?
She replied with a mean look and a raised voice. Does it look like I give a fuck? Henry apologized.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just curious.
No, I'm sorry. I was playing with you, she explained, in a milder tone, asking for forgiveness. That first one, it really does stand for, does it look like I give a fuck? See? DILLIGAF. She pointed to each letter.
Oh, yeah,
Henry realized. He was relieved that she wasn't going to punch him.
And what about this one? FTW.
Fuck the world, she added with a smirk.
And this one? WWJD?
That's what would Jesus do?
Wow, they sure cover everything, don't they?
Jack bought 3 patches, an American flag with the words Black Hills Sturgis 2002, another with the words Sturgis 2002, and one that summed it all up for him. I rode mine, Sturgis 2002. The custom motorcycles were showstoppers. Every once in a while they would hear somebody say, "Hey, look at that!" The entire crowd would turn their heads and see a motorcycle that could only be categorized as a piece of art. Sometimes the people themselves were the entertainment. At one point, he and Henry stopped dead in their tracks. The woman in front of them had on leather chaps and a tiny thong beneath it. That was it. Her ass cheeks were out in the open for all to see in their splendid roundness. Henry giggled. Jack smiled. No words were uttered. They stared in awe as a few guys cut in front of them and started taking pictures of the framed ass. They finished their way up and down both sides of Main Street and hit all of the other attractions on the side streets. Time flew, and their legs were getting tired, and they realized they had been walking for hours. Up ahead, a large banner flapped in the wind. Roaring Wheels Custom Bikes. The trailer was the background, and a temporary tent covered the large outdoor showroom in front of it. Henry shouted, "There's Wheels!" Jack put his arm out and held Henry back. "Wait a minute. Back up. Over here." He pulled Henry behind a food booth and made sure there were people in front of them to block them from being seen. Jack pointed through the crowd towards Wheels' display. "He's talking to those guys who beat you up. The DTs."
DTs? What's DTs?
Henry crouched down in fear.
You mean the guys you owe the money to?
"Yeah."
Well, you paid them, right?
Henry asked as he looked at Jack from his hiding position. "Yeah."
So why are we hiding then?
Jack was concerned. If Henry was going to be a part of the ticket exchange, and he had to be, then he could no longer keep this secret from him. So he blurted it out. "They kidnapped Yogi, and they want the stolen lottery tickets that I have. They beat you up because they thought you were me, and now they want you to make the exchange for the tickets for Yogi. That's why you're here. They insisted you make the exchange. I'm sorry I tricked you into coming." Henry's mouth was wide open in disbelief. Then, concerned, he admitted,
I knew that story about you owing money to a bookie was bull poop. Is Yogi okay? I'll do anything I can to help out, you know that.
"Good. I knew we could count on you. As far as we know, Yogi's fine." They watched the conversation between Wheels and the DTs from their safe distance. Jack added, "I hope they're making the plans now for the exchange. Let's wait until they leave. See that big one on the left with the cast on? Yogi broke that guy's arm. I hope he didn't take any revenge with Yogi. And those other 2 were there that day too." They continued to watch from the food stand and shifted their stance back and forth, trying to stay blocked from view as people came and went, buying food then leaving. They saw Wheels stand mostly with his arms folded in defiance of the 3 DTs. He had kept his cool until the end, when he poked his finger into one of the biker's chest and threatened him in a stern voice. Wheels was concerned for Yogi, and he finally came out of his laid-back persona. On the 3rd poke into the DT's chest, all hell broke loose. Punches were thrown, legs were kicking, and the scene turned ugly. The guy with the cast swung his encased arm at Wheels, who ducked at the right moment. The cast arm continued its swinging motion until it hit the other DT in the head, knocking him to the ground. The 3rd DT took a ball-peen hammer out of his back pocket and lunged at Wheels, who simply backed off. The rest of Wheels' staff surrounded the scene to ensure that this was not going to escalate any further. Jack and Henry scurried over to the tent to add their numbers to the troops. The biker who was hit in the face with the arm cast picked himself up off the ground. His nose was bleeding. He took the hammer from the other guy and whacked it against the gas tank of a $50,000 custom bike, and it made an awful clank. They all cringed, as though someone's bones were just broken. Wheels' staff started to close in, but he put his arms out and shouted,
"Wait! Let him go!"
The silence and calmness that arrived with those words was like somebody threw a switch. Wheels walked up to the guy with the hammer, within inches of his face, and warned them.
"You tell Gunner that if Yogi is returned to me with even as much as a mosquito bite, I will personally hunt down each and every one of you dipshits and rip your arms off. That way you'll never ride again. Do you understand me?"
The DTs took the threat as offered, and their facial expressions reflected the fact that they knew he wasn't kidding. They nodded, realized they were outnumbered, and backed away from the crowd. The guy with the cast turned around and added, "You just bring those sample tickets to us, and don't fuck this up." The DTs fired up their bikes and drove off. Wheels was steaming inside, but he kept his cool. Jack approached Wheels. "What did they say about the exchange?" Wheels looked at Jack and gave a sideways nod toward Henry. Jack confessed. "He knows. I told him everything." Wheels confided.
"They say Yogi's fine, unhurt for now. That was their little threat to make sure the deal goes through. They have him handcuffed in a camper somewhere in one of the campgrounds. I'm pretty sure it's the Buffalo Chip campground, but I know they camped there in the past."
Henry asked, "Are we going to go get him?"
"No. We'll do the exchange and play by their rules. It's set for Monday night, 7 o'clock, downtown on the corner of 1st and Main. But now they want the first 5 tickets of every roll as a sample, so they can find a few winners. They plan on sending somebody back to Colorado to cash them in, to verify they've been cleared by Yogi. They want those samples in 2 hours. Jack, give Big Tony your room key and tell him where the tickets are. He'll bring the sample tickets to the DTs and meet us later. They mentioned Yogi's been very cooperative, and they even gave him a full use of a computer. And knowing Yogi like I do, I'll bet he's done more harm than good for them. They just don't know it yet."
The crew pushed the wounded custom bike into the trailer to replace the gas tank. Wheels instructed,
"Get the tank with the shooting stars on it. That one will match the fenders."
He turned back to Jack and Henry.
"So how'd you guys do today?"
Henry shouted out.
"Oh, we had a great time. We saw women with their asses hanging out,"
Wheels added.
"You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait until you visit the campgrounds. Are you guys hungry?"
Yeah, they shouted in unison.
"Good. Let's head over to the Knuckle Saloon. I'm buying."
Jack was concerned about his bike, still parked in the center lane on Main Street. "I need to go get my bike," Wheels told him.
No offense, Jack, but with 10,000 bikes parked downtown, yours ain't exactly at the top of the list to be stolen. But I like your concern. Trust me, it's safe."
Jack rode with Wheels, and Henry rode with Red. The Knuckle Saloon was packed. A live band belted out steady rock music, and between songs, the crowd was as loud as the band. As they walked through the gathering, people called out Wheels' name. He waved and nodded to different ones, saying things like,
"Hey, you old son of a bitch,"
and,
"Hey, mama, how's your old man?"
He was as popular there as he was in Colorado. Red received her share of yells and whistles, too. She was quick with her tongue and was definitely a crowd favorite. "Hey, Red," someone shouted sarcastically from a nearby table. "Want to go for a ride?" The men at the table busted out with laughter. Red, not missing a beat, came back with, "I don't know, Tootie. It wouldn't be much of a ride. I hear you can't get it up anymore." And they all erupted with yells and screams of laughter as the men sitting nearby punched Tootie in the arm. From the back of the room, a man called out, "Hey, Wheels, how the hell are you?" It was an old friend that Wheels had not seen for a few years. They chatted for a while, and then the group offered their table to him because they were getting up to leave. A 350-pound man with a 2-foot-long beard wearing overalls tapped Wheels on the shoulder.
"Gunner's boys are looking for you." "I know. We already talked. Thanks,"
Wheels said, giving the man a friendly tap on the back. They sat down and ordered dinner. Different people would come up to the table and say hello, sometimes hugging, others shaking hands. It was like a family reunion, with some of them seeing each other once a year and the others acting like they had been missing from the fold for decades. "Oh, shit," Red exclaimed. "Here comes Buck." Henry asked her.
Who's Buck?
"He's my old boyfriend. We almost got hitched a few years back, but he couldn't commit." Buck was 6'6" and had arms like tree trunks. He approached the table with, "Howdy, boys. How y'all doing?" The table responded back graciously, as they all knew him well. Red squirmed in her chair, pretending not to notice him. "Hello, Red. You sure are looking good. How are you?" Red turned to face him. "Hi, Buck." She smirked, short and to the point. Buck, realizing he was getting the cold shoulder, stated, "I hear you guys had some trouble with the Gunners boys today. If you need some help, let me know. I still owe 'em for the Daytona incident." Wheels acknowledged.
Thanks, Buck. We appreciate it.
Wheels didn't need an old nemesis of Gunners hanging around for the big exchange on Monday. He wanted it to go as smooth as possible, and he didn't need to fan the flames of old wars. At Daytona in '99, Gunner had overheard Buck disrespect his club. So Gunner gathered his boys and they pissed into Buck's gas tank. It was a postponed revenge, still waiting for its ugly head to turn up. Buck turned back to face Red. "So, Red, will you have a drink with me later?" Red scooted her chair to her left and put her arms around Henry. "I don't think so. My old man wouldn't like that." Buck turned to look at Henry, and his face frowned with disbelief. "That wimp is your old man?" "Yeah, right." Henry was frozen. No movement, no expression. He looked like a dummy at the wax museum. He stared at Buck with a blank look on the outside and sheer panic on the inside. Jack was worried for Henry and looked at Wheels for some sign of intervention. Wheels looked back and had the slightest smile on his face and shook his head slightly in a no movement, giving Jack a sign that things would not escalate. Red proudly broadcast, "Buck, I want you to meet Hammer. Hammer, this is Buck." Buck's facial expression turned from disbelief to one of respect. "You're Hammer? I thought you'd be bigger," Henry added in a cocky voice, sitting up straight, now thinking he had an advantage. "I didn't mean anything personal about that wimp comment, no offense. Me and Red go way back, and sometimes I get a little possessive when I'm around her, even though we're not an item anymore." Henry extended his hand across the table, and Buck shook it. Jack let out a sigh of relief. Then Red turned to Henry and grabbed his head and kissed him with her tongue, probing into Henry's mouth. Henry's eyes bulged out and met Jack's eyes sitting next to him, whose eyes were bulging out even more. Fortunately, Red's head was blocking Henry's surprised look from Buck, who was now awkwardly tense. "Well, I gotta go." Buck excused himself. I'll see you guys later." Red broke away from her kiss with Henry and called out in a sarcastic tone, "Bye, Buck." As Buck made his way to the other side of the room, everyone at the table looked at each other, back and forth. No words were said, but everybody's expressions said it all. Henry was still in shock over the kiss and had a smile on his face that was classic. Jack stared in disbelief. When they knew Buck was no longer within earshot, the rest of the table finally burst out laughing. Wheels shook his head and told a passing waitress,
"Hey, hon, 2 more pitchers of beer, please."
Later, Big Tony joined them and reported the sample tickets were delivered with no problem. As the night went on, a parade of old friends stopped by and said their hellos, each reminiscing about the last time they had seen each other or asked about common friends they hadn't seen in a while. Almost all who stopped by asked about Yogi. Wheels told them,
"Yogi's here somewhere. I'll tell him you said hi."
The procession ranged from a 65-year-old weather-looking biker with an eye patch to a young pretty girl with tattoos that would make a Samoan chief jealous. Each person who stopped by related a story or two, and each story was funnier than the previous one. The band played loud, the beer kept coming, and the laughter never stopped. The next morning, Jack woke up with a pounding head. He felt like he had swallowed his pillow. He sat there in a daze with only one eye open, bringing his hand to his mouth, trying to scrape last night's residue from his tongue. Henry's bed hadn't been slept in. The last thing Jack could remember was when a one-legged biker took his wooden leg off and hit a guy with an eye patch. He vaguely remembered them arguing about who had it tougher, and Peg pulled his leg off and whacked Cy in his head. After that, everything was a blur. Where's Henry? How did I get back to the hotel? Where's my Harley? What time is it? Jack strained his eyes to look at the clock radio next to the bed. It was 1:15 in the afternoon. He stood up, but quickly fell back down against the bed. It felt like he had a gyroscope in his head that someone kicked out of orbit. He slowly made his way to the bathroom and noticed a piece of paper that someone had slid under his door. The note read, Jack, Henry slept in my room, passed out on the floor. Wheels put your bike in the trailer overnight. Call me at this number when you're about an hour from being ready to go to town. Wake up Henry, room 114. Red. He walked down the hall to Red's room and knocked on the door several times before he finally heard someone shuffling to the door. The clicks of the locks and safety bar were followed by more clicks before Henry could find the right combination to open the door. He opened the door and stood there, and they looked at each other, still dressed in last night's clothes. Jack was groggy. You okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Henry spit out an imaginary obstruction from his mouth.
But I feel like I ate a live bird or something.
Me too. Henry was confused.
Why are you just getting back now?
Jack defended himself. I've been in my room all night. You're the one who didn't come home. Henry now looked puzzled.
What the heck are you talking about?
Jack explained. This is Red's room. You slept with her last night.
I did not,
Henry exclaimed with his eyes opening to the max. Jack corrected himself. Well, maybe not with her exactly. Here, read this. Henry read the note, turned to look back into the room, then turned back to look at Jack. Henry stepped out into the hallway and closed the door.
Which one is our room?
Follow me. After Jack showered, he called Red to let her know they were about an hour from being ready. Red told him, I'll meet you out front at 3 o'clock. Pinky and I will pick you guys up. Bye. Pinky? Jack spoke into the now dead phone. Pinky is here? He put the phone down and asked himself, does he have the bag? Is it the same Pinky? Yeah, it has to be. How many bikers are named Pinky? End chapter 17.